Steam locomotives have historically so often been compared to horses. After all, that's what they were built to replace. It's quite an evocative description, one that conjures up visions of an elegant and refined creature gracefully racing across the land. But one railway felt that equestrian locomotives weren't enough, and what they needed wasn't stallions, but bears. By the 1920s, demand for coal all over the world was growing, and as such it became a high priority traffic for most railways, especially seeing how they relied on coal to function themselves. This was no different in Bulgaria, but the coal traffic did prove to be slightly problematic on one particular stretch of line between Pernik and Sofia, where loaded trains had to be pulled up long grades as steep as 2.63%, or some as intense as 1 in 36. As demand for coal grew, so too did the size of the trains, and it wasn't long before the engines pulling them couldn't keep up. The lack of power problem was solved in 1922 with the introduction of the Bulgarian State Railways Series 4000, an O12O tank engine design with 1,340mm driving wheels. Measuring 14.4 meters long and with compounded cylinders, it was capable of reaching speeds of up to 45 kilometers an hour and was surprisingly flexible. This was because the driving wheels were designed to allow for some lateral movement. The first and sixth driving axles having 28mm of lateral movement, the second and fifth axles were fixed in place, the third axle had 15mm of movement, and the wheels on the fourth axle had no flanges. 10 of these engines were built by Hanomag in Germany, and while big, bulky and slow, they were pretty strong to make up for it, able to haul trains weighing well over 300 tons up the steep grades of the line. Strong as they weren't strong enough to keep up with the railway's growing demands, and by 1930 the weight of the coal trains had increased. An even bigger engine was needed, but with some bends having a tight radius of 250 meters, an O12O design was already pushing the limits. This didn't stop Bulgarian State Railways, however, who ordered a series of even bigger locomotives from Sigelski in Poland. This design was a 212-4 tank engine, and while it possessed the same 1,340mm driving wheels as the first 12-wheelers, it was built with utility and practicality in mind. The boiler was a standardized design that was also used in the Series 1s, 2s and 10s, and the firebox was designed specially to burn the low-calorie coal that the mines in Pernik produced, as well as deal with the slag that would build up from burning it. A fresh air system was also installed in the cabs to help crews breathe when travelling through the many tunnels along the line. These engines weren't compounded, instead using a pair of chunky 700 by 700mm high-pressure cylinders to power the driving wheels, and measured 18.2 meters in length. Despite being a non-articulated design that was bigger than the 4000s, they were still surprisingly flexible. The front axle was radially adjustable by 80mm, while the main driving axles possessed a similar amount of lateral play as their forebears, with both the third and fourth driving axles being flangeless. This allowed the engines to negotiate bends with a radius as tight as 180 meters. Not bad considering their size. They were classified as the 4500 series, with 12 being built in 1931 and put to work on the Pernik-Sofia line, while the original 4000s were put to work elsewhere. They quickly proved to be fit for the job, being able to reach a top speed of 65 km an hour and pull trains weighing over 420 tons uphill at 20 km an hour. It wasn't long before the coal trains they were pulling got even bigger. Some trains ended up weighing over 1,200 tons and required 3 engines at once to move them. By 1936, the 4000s and 4500s were reclassified as the Series 45s and 46s respectively. 8 more 46s were ordered in 1942, but Poland was unable to build them due to the war. As such, Bulgarian State Railways had to order them from BMAG in Berlin. The new German-built engines appeared the same on the surface, but on the inside featured a few changes, most notably them being fitted with 3 550 by 650mm cylinders instead of just 2. This was done to help reduce the boxing motion produced by the cylinders when the engines got up to speed, making the ride much smoother and less intensive on the rails. The new engines also had slightly shorter side tanks, outside frames on their trailing wheels, and weighed slightly more than their Polish-built counterparts. After being tested in Germany, they were sent to Bulgaria where they joined the rest of the Series 46s in 1943. Altogether, these 20 locomotives were the biggest single-frame tank engines in the world and among the most powerful locomotives to ever run in Europe, beating out some of the bigger articulated locomotives that were in service around the same time. Their power, size, and lumbering nature earned them the nickname of Mother Bear among railwaymen, a name they carried for the rest of their careers. Despite their immense power, they only ever seemed to work on the Pernix-Sofia line pulling coal and freight trains, taking it in turns to serve as banking engines. Not exactly an exciting line of work for some of the most powerful locomotives in Europe, but it's work they seemed quite content in doing. All 20 engines were still in use by the mid-1960s, some of which had been modified to burn oil instead of coal, but were eventually put into storage by 1969. They were officially retired in 1975, and not long afterwards the process of scrapping them began. Luckily, 2 examples have been preserved: 2-cylinder Polish-built engine 4603 and 3-cylinder German engine 4613, with 4603 having been restored to working order in 2015. Though they may not have had much of an exciting career outside of moving heavy coal trains, the Series 46s are still perhaps some of the most impressive engines to have ever worked in Europe, never mind Bulgaria. Just something worth bearing in mind next time someone brings up big steam locomotives and horsepower. Subscribe for more.